We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Why did Labor lie to Australians about your plan to tax them more?
Order. I just want to deal with the word lie, and I have a number of order. We just want to make sure that it is not directed to a person. Former speakers have directed it to parties, political governments. So I'm just going to be careful with that word today to make sure it's not directed to an individual. Just putting everyone on notice. I've got a list of examples here where we can have that withdrawn. So as long as everyone knows the rules, we'll be fine. Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his question. We are changing the tax system to give young people a fair crack at their first home. That is what we are doing. That is what we are doing.
Order. 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 The member for Forrest. Order. Members on my left will cease interjecting. Prime Minister. Order. There is far too much noise. We are not. Order. We are not. If the member for Herbert has a prop, he will not use that. Great. Just putting him on notice as well, so everyone's crystal clear. No props today as well. If any props are used, you won't be here for the remainder of question time. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. This is a change in our policy, and I'm upfront about that. But unless we act now, we're looking at a generation missing out. And indeed, someone who was appointed by the Leader of the Opposition
Order. The member
had this to say when reflecting about how their political party was going. I quote, "We were timid. We weren't prepared to lean into the challenges and the lived experience of the next generation of Australians. I'm quite happy to put things up that will robustly challenge the status quo if it means we're going to build a better future."
Oh no, the member for Herbert will leave the chamber. He's holding up a prop. I've asked him not to do that. He'll leave. We're not having props today. I can be crystal clear on this. Nice try, but we're not having them today or any other day, OK?
I can see you there anyway,
It's far too much noise. The House is going to come to order and the Prime Minister is going to be heard in silence.
That was the Shadow Treasurer talking in February. Words of wisdom and reflection from the Shadow Treasurer. Words of wisdom and reflection, Mr Speaker. When reflecting on how well they were going in replacing the former member for Farrer as leader by this bloke here.
Has the Prime Minister concluded his answer? The Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
Relevance, Mr Speaker. The question was about Labor's lies.
Order. Order. Well, if you're going to ask a question like that, you're going to get quite the answer. Order. There's just far too much noise. I know everyone seems exercised today, but we are going to show restraint and respect. We just cannot have this continue. I ask the Prime Minister to be directly relevant to the question.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Well, when I talk to young Australians who are this close to giving up any opportunity to aspire to own their own home, when I speak to their parents and grandparents who say that they are worried that their children and grandchildren will never be able to own their own home, what we are not prepared to do is just sit back and kick the can further down the road. What we are doing is acting in support of aspiration, acting in support of growing the economy, acting in support of housing supply, because the difference between investing in an existing home with negative
Member
gearing
for Barker
as it
will
benefits
cease
the
interjecting.
investor, but if you invest in a new home, it benefits the investor and it benefits the nation.
Far too much noise from the member for Barker, the member for Casey, and the member for Goldstein, who is also the author of the MPI today. So I'm sure he'll want that to proceed. The call to the member for Bass.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How will the Albanese Labor government's budget help ease cost of living pressures, help younger Australians get into their own home and make our economy more resilient for future generations?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the fantastic member for Bass for her question. Someone who came into this place as a former school teacher and understands that the kids that she used to teach in those classrooms need to be able to aspire to their own home. Our budget helps Australians with the cost of living.
No, the
Our
Prime
budget backs
Minister is
aspiration.
going to pause. The member for Gippsland is not going to interject anymore. You've been yelling non-stop through yesterday's question time and today. You're on a warning. One more word, you're not going to be here for the remainder of question time. Prime Minister, the member for Bass has asked her question. The Prime Minister is entitled to answer it.
Importantly as well, Mr Speaker, it builds Australia's resilience. At a time of global instability and turbulence, we have managed today to have more fuel in Australia than we had on February 28th. And the package in this budget on fuel security will further help that. Those opposite said, why are they bothering to talk in Southeast Asia? They took the same principle that they did in government, where they ignored our neighbourhood where we live. They've taken that principle into their ever-diminishing opposition, Mr Speaker. Now, we've also...
The manager on a point of order.
Relevance. The question was very clear.
Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Because under the standing orders, you're entitled to raise a point of relevance, which you did. You don't need to explain what that is. And I've got plenty of examples we can go through about what former speakers have handled this exactly the same way, and I'm happy to list them to the member if he requires it. Prime Minister, in continuation.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. We have cut taxes for 13 million Australians. Five times. The first one, the one that they said they'd reverse. Then, of course, our second tax cut that begins, our top-up that begins on July 1. The further top-up that begins on July 1 next year. Then the $1,000 automatic tax deduction. And then, of course, our working Australians tax offset. If you add all that up, for average workers it's around $2,800, of which they will be better off. We've not only done that, we've put in place measures such as cheaper medicines, the making permanent the urgent care clinics as part of Medicare, something opposed by those opposite, and now they all want one on their corner. We have made free take permanent. We are making a difference with cheaper batteries, benefiting hundreds of thousands of Australians as well. But importantly as well, we are giving Australians a fair crack at buying their first home, backing aspiration. Now, the Coalition have already told us what they are against. In interview after interview, asked about helping young Australians into their own home, they've said they're against it. They'll repeal it now. They'll repeal it. It's a repeat of what happened. A repeat of what happened 1 year ago, and we know how that ended. These geniuses are going to go to an election saying that they will repeal young Australians getting a fair go.
The member for Forrest will leave the chamber under 94A for that continual interjection and yelling during the Prime Minister's answer. And plenty of people will follow him today if that continues. We'll hear from the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister confirm that 35,000 fewer homes will be built as a result of Labor's new taxes?
Order. Give the call to the Prime Minister. Order.
What I can confirm is, as a direct result, and it's there in the budget papers, increase housing supply by at least 30,000. 30,000 as a direct result.
Order.
The $2 billion local infrastructure fund will support up to 65,000 new homes over the decade.
Order.
Budget paper number 1.
Order. The member for Cook and the member for
Statement
Goldstein
4,
will just
page
read his book.
158. Page 158. Quote, "The measures in this budget are expected to improve home ownership and increase the overall supply of housing." That is what we are doing. This $2 billion additional takes our Homes for Australia plan to $47 billion.
Member for Cowper.
So whether it's increased public housing through our Housing Australia Future Fund, opposed so strongly by those opposite, whether it is private rentals through our build-to-rent scheme, whether it be our shared equity scheme, whether it be our support for local infrastructure, or whether it be the changes that we are proposing, which will ensure that people who want to negatively gear an investment property in the future will invest in new supply, therefore benefiting not just themselves but benefiting the nation as well. All of those measures, every single one of them, is about boosting supply as we go
Order.
forward.
The member for
But we're
Fisher.
doing more than that as well, because we're reserving a whole range of those houses for first home buyers alone, making sure that we deliver on successful programs that are underway right around the country. But in addition to that, of course, we're making sure that the workforce is there to build those houses. That's why we have free TAFE. That's why we have a $10,000 incentive for construction apprentices or for electrical apprentices as well. All of it opposed by those opposite. Those opposite who didn't even bother to have a housing minister during most of their time in office. Now, we want to make sure that we continue to give Australians a fair crack going forward. Those opposite have blocked every single housing measure that we've put forward. They delayed a whole range of them along with their friends in the Senate. What we're doing
Order. Members on my left.
is moving forward. Labor is the party of aspiration, and this budget last night shows that.
Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the member for Banks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How will the Albanese Labor government's budget help to reform our economy and make Australia more resilient to economic shocks, and how does that compare to other approaches?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and a big thank you to the member for Banks as well, an absolutely outstanding and valued member of our team on this side of the House. He knows, Mr Speaker, that this is a responsible budget which is all about resilience and reform at the same time. Not resilience or reform, but resilience and reform. It's all about getting Australians through this global oil shock and building an economy that works for more people, Mr Speaker. This budget helps Australians today and it lifts living standards into the future by responding to the global oil shock, by taking pressure off Australians with cost of living and housing, by making our economy more productive over time, by delivering tax reform for workers, businesses, home buyers and future generations, and by making sensible and responsible savings to make sure that the deficits are smaller every year of the forward estimates. Now, Mr Speaker, in this budget, when it comes to fuel, in addition to all of the good work done by the PM, the Minister for Energy and others, we've got a fuel security package which is investing in more fuel for more motorists and more industries to keep our country moving. We're also more than halving the fuel excise and reducing the heavy vehicle road user charge, as well as the fuel and fertiliser security facility, Mr Speaker. On housing, we're reforming the tax system to support more first home buyers, and we're investing an extra $2 billion to build up to 65,000 more homes in our plan, which now goes to $47 billion, as the Prime Minister said. We're rolling out tax cuts for every working Australian, in addition to the 3 tax cuts already on the way, plus the instant tax deduction. Mr Speaker, this is a government cutting income taxes for working Australians 5 times, 5 different ways in just 4 years, Mr Speaker. We've got a comprehensive package to boost productivity, to save business more than $10 billion a year in compliance costs and to boost long-run GDP, Mr Speaker. We've got big investments in innovation and investment to make sure that we support all kinds of businesses, the dynamic part of our economy which will create wealth and opportunity into the future. And we're doing all of this while finding an historically high amount of savings in the budget, $63.8 billion of savings, a net improvement to the budget of $25.1 billion. For the first time in the history of this country, we are in 2 consecutive budget updates banking every extra dollar of revenue when it comes to revenue upgrades. So this is an ambitious budget. It provides immediate support to Australians. It delivers urgent economic reforms. And it also, very importantly, Mr Speaker, doesn't forget our obligations to future generations.
Before I call the member for Kennedy, I'll just welcome a few people to the gallery, and he will get the call as soon as I am done. I'm pleased to inform that the House that present at the gallery today are participants of the Disability Trust Next Step program, an initiative for young people focusing on employment pathways, skill building and workplace experience, as guests of the member for Whitlam. I'm also pleased to advise the House that we have representatives from Wattle-Nest, a non-profit organisation that provides support for emerging athletes and aspiring Olympians who may be experiencing financial stress and resulting mental health issues. With the group is the Wattle-Nest founder Rachel Conders-Fields, as well as Wattle-Nest athlete Jess Lloyd, and an Australian representative Archer from the sunny coast chasing her Olympic dream. And we've got the mayors from the Parks Electorate, including the Deputy Mayor of Park Shire, Councillor Darryl Timms, the Mayor of Narrabri Shire, and Councillor Catherine Reinfish, the Mayor of Warrumbungle Shire Council, as guests of the member for Parks. And give the call to the honourable member for Kennedy.
Prime Minister, you cannot have agriculture without fertiliser. Diammonium phosphate is the most common fertiliser. The only plant in Australia is in Mount Isa, supplying almost half of Australia's needs. It is being choked to death by a monopolistic Woolworths and Coles type gas supply. Prime Minister, congratulations on the reserve resource policy, but it has no teeth. Without price controls, we will still be left in a monopolistic situation. Prime Minister, will you save Australia's phosphate plant, 17,000 jobs, or will your government continue with this free market, teacher's pet mentality and import 100% of our fertiliser?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Kennedy for his question. I'll ask the Minister for Resources to supplement my answer. But can I say that my government has been very focused on this. As the member for Kennedy knows, I visited the great town of Mount Isa on many occasions, including with him. And we have intervened together with the Crisafulli government in a bipartisan way across the Commonwealth and the Queensland government to defend industry there, particularly because we know the phosphate industry is critical for Australia. Had we not intervened last year, if we'd had the free market, let it rip approach, then we would have been in a really dire situation right now. That's the truth. And I say that the Minister for Industry, Tim Ayres, has worked very closely as well with his counterparts to make sure that we weren't in that position. I'll ask the Minister for Resources to add as well, but I thank the member for the way, that diligent way, that he represents that community in such a passionate way to make sure that jobs and industry are protected, not just in the interests of the people of Kennedy, but of course in the interests of the national interests, because those industries are so important for our national economy.
Call to the Minister for Resources, the Minister for Northern Australia.
Thanks, Speaker, and thanks, Prime Minister. And thanks, of course, to the member for Kennedy. Is quite, of course, right to say that agriculture depends on fertiliser. In this budget, and I congratulate the Treasurer, the Minister for Agriculture, for the Fuel Security and Resilience package, and part of that is a $7.5 billion fuel and fertiliser security package. We have, and I'll turn to the way forward in a moment, but we have secured, through the new powers given to Export Finance Australia, 90,000 tonnes of urea to Australia. We're supporting Incitec, Pivot and CSBP, and 250,000 tonnes of urea from Indonesia through that new mechanism. You're right to identify the supply chain challenge, but moving to the future, this government has invested, as many will be aware, over $475 million through the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility for the Perdaman Urea Facility in Karratha. This government and me, as a Minister for Northern Australia, has supported a $220 million loan to Perdaman to build the largest urea plant, a $160 million loan to the Pilbara Ports Authority, and a $95 million loan to the Water Corporation. This total $475 million federal commitment to the project and supporting infrastructure will see over $8 billion as investment. And I know those opposite want to take credit, but the thing is they didn't secure the approvals for the project. That is the truth. They talk a big game, they don't do anything. They failed to invest more, but Member for Kennedy, as you know, we will make this country urea independent, and by the middle of next year is when production will commence, and I think we can look forward to that.
We'll hear from the member for Kennedy has had his question, and he can have another question a bit later on if he's lucky. Give the call to the honourable member for Deakin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing. How is the Albanese Labor government helping first home buyers get into a home of their own, and is the minister aware of any risks to this work?
Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Speaker, the member for Deakin is a fantastic champion for aspiring homeowners in his electorate, and I want to thank him for this question. Speaker, too many Australians today feel that the housing system is stacked against them, and especially younger Australians. And Speaker, they're not imagining it. Right across our community, home ownership rates are declining. They're declining across all age brackets, Speaker, but the effects are particularly pronounced when we look at what's going on for younger Australians. Now, Speaker, as Housing Minister, I often get asked what are the things that keep me up at night, and here's one of them. Since the year I was born, a low-income young couple in this country are half as likely to own their own home than they were in 1980. Half as likely, Speaker. Now, we know those opposite are obsessed with division and conflict, and they're talking about these important changes as though this is some kind of fight between the generations. But they know, and I know, Speaker, that as people representing the Australian community, we are just as likely to get stopped in the street by grandparents who are worried about their grandchildren and parents who are worried about their kids, Speaker. Our housing challenge is affecting the whole country, and that's why our government has built the boldest and most ambitious agenda to tackle this that a Commonwealth government has had in 70 years. Speaker, we're building more homes because we know the main game is building, 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 because more housing means more affordable housing for Australians. But, Speaker, it's really important that we address the playing field and levelling that playing field for first home buyers. Now, Speaker, our 5% deposit program helps you get to the auction sooner, from 11 years to save a deposit down to 2 or 3. And, Speaker, that's already changed the lives of 240,000 Australians around the country. So we help you get to the auction faster, Speaker. Now we're giving you a fair shot when you get here. Speaker, our home ownership package will help an additional 75,000 Australians go from renting into home ownership. Now, Speaker, I'm asked about risks, and we've already got one on the table. We've heard that the Liberal Party plan to oppose these reforms and unwind them at the next election. Now, Speaker, this is a political party for which one of their foundation beliefs was a belief in home ownership. They have completely lost their way, Speaker. And Speaker, they speak of aspiration. There is no greater aspiration in this country than young people wanting to get the keys to their first home, Speaker. Well, why is it that Liberals have come in consistently over the last 4 years, and voted against every initiative that we have put forward to help first home buyers? Speaker, first home buyers have a hell of a challenge out there, but I want them to know that they have a Labor government and 93 Labor members behind me that are with them and fighting for them every single day.
Call to the Shadow Treasurer.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Since Labor came to office, 1.4 million people have arrived in Australia. This year alone, the government is also building 77,000 homes behind its housing target. Treasurer, where will all these new migrants live?
The member for Kennedy. The Treasurer has the call.
Mr Speaker, I hope the Shadow Treasurer is aware that when he blows on the dog whistle, they can hear it in Goldstein too. They can hear it in Goldstein too. And when the Shadow Treasurer said he was prepared to be in a government with One Nation, I think they heard it in Goldstein. I think they heard that in Goldstein too, Mr Speaker. Now, when it comes to the migration numbers in the budget and the housing numbers in the budget, it's very inconvenient to those opposite that when we came to office, the net overseas migration number was surging. And what we've been able to do in the 4 years that we've been in office is to see net overseas migration come down 45% off its peak. And there are additional steps in the budget to put more downward pressure on net overseas migration, Mr Speaker. So 45% down from the peak after the surge that we inherited from those opposite, Mr Speaker. That's on the net overseas migration numbers, down 45% from their peak. In the last full year, they came in 30,000 fewer than the Treasury forecast in the budget. So we've been managing that down, Mr Speaker. Obviously, there are calculations around departures and the like which are altering the forecast this year and next year. But overall, net overseas migration has come down. I didn't see you mentioning that when you're traipsing from disappointed door to disappointed door in Farrer, Mr Speaker. That's the first point. The second point, Mr Speaker, is this. The second point is this, and the Housing Minister just made this point, I think, in a very compelling way. Our budgets, not just the budget on Tuesday night, but all of our budgets,
the Treasurer will pause. We're not going to have that sort of language. We'll just ask for that to be withdrawn.
I withdraw.
I thank the member for Marinowell.
Hello,
Order. The Treasurer will continue.
So the point that the Housing Minister was making is that our big investments in the budget on Tuesday night in housing supply were not the first time that we had come to the table with very substantial investments. An extra $2 billion in the budget means an extra 65,000 homes because it invests in the small-scale infrastructure, the drains, the power infrastructure, the local road infrastructure to get more projects over the line. So that's just the latest instalment. That's just the latest instalment in this government's enthusiastic investment in trying to make up the lost ground from the decade of those opposite doing almost nothing when it comes to housing supply. Now, Mr Speaker, if I'm asked about housing and I'm asked about progress that this government has made, let me give you a few sets of numbers. Dwelling commencements are up 26%. They were falling 28% under those opposite. Dwelling building approvals up 13%. They were falling 21% under those opposite. Dwelling investment up 5.5%, falling 3.6% under those opposite. We know that there's more work to do to build more homes in local communities, and that's why there's extra investment in the budget.
Hear from the honourable member for Braddon.
My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government continuing the work of strengthening Medicare after a decade of cuts and neglect?
Call to the Minister for Health and Ageing, the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker. Well, last night the Treasurer delivered his and the government's fifth budget, and in every single one of those budgets, a priority of this government has been strengthening Medicare. And I struggle to think of a community that has benefited more from our Medicare investments than North West Tasmania. And I struggle to think of a candidate who more energetically has campaigned for those investments, the member for Braddon. It may be part of the reason why she got the biggest swing to her at the last election of any one of the 150 members in this House, Mr Speaker. Other, of course, than her endless charm and energy as a candidate, Mr Speaker. Last night we provisioned $25 billion in additional hospital funding, Mr Speaker. $25 billion more than they would have got, the states and territories, if the agreement negotiated under the Morrison government had been continued. And I'm really pleased to say that the biggest beneficiaries of that additional investment are the smaller states, because they had been getting a raw deal for far too long. Tasmania will get an additional almost $1 billion, really lifting them up to the level they should have been for years and years. And I know that's going to make a difference not just to Braddon but to all of the communities in Tasmania, Mr Speaker. We also locked in that investment for Medicare urgent care clinics, making them a permanent feature of our Medicare system. The Devonport urgent care clinics already seen more than 40,000 people all bulk billed. The Burnie urgent care clinic, which was recently opened in the soon-to-be-open Burnie Health Hub, has already seen thousands of patients from that part of Devonport as well, Mr Speaker. And can I also say Braddon has had one of the best responses to our bulk billing investments of any community. One of the best to the first investment we made for 2023, targeted at pensioners and concession card holders, and since our additional record investment in November, the number of bulk billing practices in Braddon has more than doubled. Now 7 out of 10 general practices in Braddon bulk bill all of their patients all of the time, Mr Speaker. And that's not to mention the cheaper medicines benefits, 2.5 million cheaper scripts just in the member for Braddon's community, hundreds of millions across the broader nation. Mental health investments to open a new Medicare mental health centre in Devonport late last year, with another one to come in Burnie in the future. Uplifting the headspace at Burnie, which will be now a full service as well, Mr Speaker. We know the difference that these strengthening Medicare investments make, not just in the member for Braddon's electorates, but in electorates right across the country, those represented by those opposite the crossbench and Labor electorates as well, because Medicare is just the core social program for our country.
Has concluded. Before I call the member for Goldstein, I'm pleased to inform the House that we've been joined in the gallery today of a large parliamentary delegation from the National Assembly of Kenya, led by the Honourable Jeremiah Milibena, the CBS MP, the Member of Parliament and the Speaker's panel. Accompanied by the delegation is His Excellency Dr Wilson Kogo, the High Commissioner of Kenya to Australia. I see we've got a group of Melbourne University political activists joining us today, a large delegation as guests of the member for Moncrief, and students from the Catholic College from Wodonga, Year 11 and 12, from the electorate of Indi. Give the call to the member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Jack earns $25,000 income and realises a capital gain of $10,000. The tax on Jack's capital gain is $1,400, equal to his marginal tax rate of 14%. As Jack's marginal tax rate is lower than Labor's new 30% investment tax, Jack needs to pay an additional $1,600 in tax. Prime Minister, why is this government stealing $1,600 of Jack's future home deposit and taxing lower-income earners and undermining the tax-free threshold?
We're just going to withdraw that part of the question of accusing someone of that term. So we'll just withdraw that.
I'll withdraw that.
Thank you.
Tax.
Yeah. Just remember all parliamentary language. Order. Members on my left, members on my right. The member for Moncrief, we're not going to have anything until the House comes to order. Treasurer has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I appreciate the question being flicked to me from the Prime Minister from the Shadow Treasurer. The question is about the examples provided in the budget to help people understand the very important, very ambitious tax reforms which are in the budget that we released last night. And an important part of that is about dealing with the big distortion that exists in our tax system, which makes it harder and harder for young people to buy their first home, particularly young people. And so what we're doing with this tax package, is better aligning the tax levied on people who work versus people who earn their income in other legitimate ways, and we're levelling the playing field in the housing market. I think any objective observer of our housing market, how it interacts with our tax system, would conclude that the combination of those two things is making it too hard for Australians, particularly younger Australians, to get a toehold in the housing market, Mr Speaker. And so that's why we are making these changes. We understand that those opposite are heading towards making the same mistake that they made at the last election in repealing, saying that they will repeal our tax package. Our tax package gives tax cuts to 13.3 million workers, Mr Speaker. For anyone who's looking for evidence that they haven't learned a thing and they haven't changed a bit, they're coming back to the well, Mr Speaker, and saying that they will repeal our tax package. Now, Mr Speaker, the question from the Shadow Treasurer is about capital gains. Now, I want to tell the House what the Shadow Treasurer wrote in his own book about capital gains. This is what he said. I'm quoting, Mr Speaker. Capital...
Order. The member for Lingiari, the Minister for Social Services, will hear from the Manager of Opposition Business.
Speaker, it goes to relevance. The question wasn't about the Shadow Treasurer's book. It was about... No, let me finish. It was about Jack and the impact on Jack from your budget. You're cutting 1,600...
If the Treasurer's got a quote and he's going to use a quote to talk about Jack or the order, but if he's going to talk about the person that he was asking, I need to make sure the quote is directly relevant to what he was asked about. I don't know what the quote's going to be. I haven't read the book, but I'll hear what the... Order. No, I haven't read the book yet. Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The member for Wannon might not think the Shadow Treasurer's views are relevant, but I do, Mr Speaker. And they're very relevant to Jack and the example that we provided in the budget papers, because this is what the Shadow Treasurer said, quoting, "Capital gains from appreciation of holding assets is taxed at half the applied rate, effectively entrenching the benefit of having and holding assets, which can only exist if you're established. There's no intergenerational justice in such preferential arrangements." That's the Shadow Treasurer. Now, Mr Speaker, also relevant to Jack is what the Shadow Treasurer said in the Parliament, Mr Speaker. This is what he said. "Today it's time to be honest. The tax system is screwing over young Australians. Instead, it favours well-off established interests against those trying to get ahead. People who can predominantly live off income from their assets can pay very little tax and get discounts on capital gains from increase in asset values." This is what he said, Mr Speaker. I'm quoting, "Young Australians need to demand a fairer tax system where they aren't the only ones carrying the burden to cover the cost of Australia." Well said, Mr Speaker.
Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for Bean.
Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. How will the Albanese Labor government's tax reforms benefit Australian workers, first home buyers and businesses? How does this compare to other approaches?
The call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thanks to the absolutely terrific member for Bean for his question and for all of the work that he does in our team as well. A big part of the ambitious budget that we handed down last night from this dispatch box was tax reform, Mr Speaker. And in that tax reform package, we took on a number of difficult issues, recognising that the tax system is part of the problem often rather than part of the solution when it comes to ensuring that our economy can work for more Australians. And so our tax reform package was really all about three objectives. The first one was about better aligning the tax treatment of people who work and people who get their income from other legitimate sources. The second motivation was to try and level the playing field to help more Australians, particularly younger Australians, get a toehold in a really difficult housing market. And the third objective is to improve productivity by encouraging more investment and more innovation in our economy. And so each of the elements of the tax package that we released last night is about satisfying one or more of those objectives that we have. And so there were tax cuts for more than 13 million workers. There were big incentives for innovation and investment, supporting small business. I shout out the wonderful Small Business Minister for her work on the small business part of this package, and also, of course, some of those admittedly politically contentious changes to capital gains and negative gearing. And again, that's about recognising that when the Howard Costello government changed the arrangements for capital gains, they introduced a big distortion into the tax system, which made it harder for Australians to buy their first home, particularly to buy their first home. And so we are acting in the budget to try and address those legitimate concerns that people have about the opportunity to own their first home, Mr Speaker. Now, I notice that the word aspiration is being used by those opposite to explain locking more and more Australians out of the housing market. And, Mr Speaker, this side of the House knows about aspiration from our local communities. That side of the House learns about aspiration from focus groups, Mr Speaker. And the reason we know that is because there is nothing aspirational about stacking the deck against young Australians. I say to the young Australians in the gallery today, this side of the House is on your side when it comes to getting a toehold in the housing market, Mr Speaker. There is nothing aspirational about a status quo that turbocharges the issues in the housing market and makes it harder and harder for more people to get ahead. This side of the House is about aspiration for more people. That side of the House sees aspiration as the exclusive preserve of a very few Australians.
Call to the member for Cook.
My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has confirmed he has used negative gearing and the CGT discount. And the Prime Minister, I note, has bought a $4 million property in Copacabana. So why is the Prime Minister stopping the next generation of Australians from using the very opportunities he has personally benefited from?
Order. Members on my right. Member for Bennelong. The Prime Minister.
For his question.
Order.
And I remind him and others that when people in the front here hand you a question, you don't have to ask it. You don't have to ask it. But so be it. What we are doing is precisely the opposite of the suggestion which he puts forward. I have had access to home ownership, and I had it in my 20s. And I had it because my mother, who lived in the one public housing her whole life,
Cook will cease interjecting.
used to say to me, when you get a chance in life, own your own home. It was drilled into me. It's the aspiration that's drilled into working-class people. Working-class people who want the next generation to be better off than they are. And that is precisely what we are doing here. Precisely what we are doing.
Members on my left, the Leader of the Opposition and the member for Groom. This is completely unacceptable. Members on my right aren't helping the situation either. I want there to be some respect and dignity back in the House. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. and I'm proud that I wasn't born to rule. I'm proud that I worked hard. I'm proud of what I've achieved. And that is why I want other young...
The Leader of the Opposition and the Minister for Infrastructure and the Minister for Environment, if the three of you continue in such way, I'll be left with no other choice but to take action. That is the last thing I wish to do. Show some restraint. The Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. And that is why in last night's budget we made sure that we do not want to leave a generation behind, that we are not prepared to sit here and know that increasingly young people are being priced out of the market, and we will say it's too hard to make this change. Too hard to make this change. We'll just occupy the space. But the other thing that we are doing, Mr Speaker, is making sure that people can still negatively gear properties and that they can as well apply the 50% capital gains discount if they wish. The difference is they will buy a new home rather than an existing one, which means that not only are they helping their aspiration, they're helping the aspiration of the country as well going forward. Our idea of helping young people is to do something practical that will help them get ahead. Their idea of the future in young people is having a ballot between Tony Abbott and Alexander Downer over who will be the next leader of the Liberal Party. They are reduced to a farce, Mr Speaker.
Order. The Prime Minister's concluded his answer. The Prime Minister's concluded his answer. Order. The members on my right can begin silent. Order. I'd like to hear from the honourable member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How does the budget strengthen Australia's fuel security and resilience and protect Australians from future energy shocks? What policies would weaken resilience?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. The member for Bendigo is a champion for rural and regional Australia, Mr Speaker. Thank you for the question. The member for Bendigo knows the importance of fuel security for her constituents, and that's why this government has worked so hard over the last 2.5 months to ensure that we now have more fuel in Australia today than we did on the day the Iran war broke out, Mr Speaker. But this government also knows we need to build for the future. That's why there was a $14.8 billion package for fuel security and cost of living relief in last night's budget. And that package has many elements. One of them of importance to rural and regional Australia is the $1.1 billion fund that the Minister for Transport and the Treasurer and I have announced to support cleaner fuels, i.e. biofuels, so that the farmers of Australia can take products like canola and tallow and turn them into fuel, Mr Speaker, which improves our fuel resilience and is great for Australia's farming sector. But we also know that there's even more to do, and that's why another element is a $3.2 billion commitment for a strategic fuel reserve owned by the government for the people. That's a key initiative, and that's been welcomed across regional Australia. Grain Growers Australia said establishing a domestic government-owned Australian fuel security reserve demonstrates significant progress. National Farmers Federation have said today's announcement of a $10 billion Australian fuel security and resilience package is a welcome step towards building sovereign capability that we need to protect our fuel system. The Australian Livestock and Rural Transporters Association have said the government has made the right call. A strategic national reserve is long overdue, and we commend the government for getting it done. So these are all rural and regional peak groups have welcomed a government-owned strategic reserve. I'll tell you who hasn't welcomed a government-owned strategic reserve: the Leader of the Opposition, who said They're going to compete in the market with the private sector. That's what this government always thinks, that the government is always the entire answer. So the opposition, or at least the Liberal Party, not sure about their coalition partners, the Nationals and One Nation, would oppose a government-owned strategic fuel reserve and take us backwards. But it's even worse than that, because we believe a government-owned fuel reserve is an important complement to increasing the minimum stock obligations of the private sector. You need to do both. The opposition's announced opposition leader announced he would increase the minimum stock obligation to 60 days and said it was 1 billion litres. Well, 1 billion litres gets you to 37 days, Mr Speaker. They couldn't even get the maths right, Mr Speaker. Not only would they not have a government-owned reserve, their private reserve doesn't add up. It doesn't matter whether it's 800 million or 80 billion, Mr Speaker. The fact of the matter is, whatever figure they choose, they haven't done the homework. Their maths don't work. They would weaken Australia's fuel security, they would weaken Australia's resilience, and the Albanese government will strengthen it.
Call to the honourable member for Fowler.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. Minister, up to 160 Australians with disability will be worse off under your government's NDIS cuts. You plan to slash 7,000 per participant from social and community supports, the very thing that connects people in multicultural communities like Fowler to culturally and linguistically appropriate care. With your $200 million Inclusive Communities Fund, how much of that money is actually quarantined for cold community?
Call to the Minister for Health and the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member for Fowler for her question. And can I take the opportunity just to say a couple of things about investments for her community? In the budget last night, she will have seen $80 million provisioned for the upgrade of the emergency department at the Fairfield Hospital, part of a $630 million total upgrade. The Minister of Energy talks to me a lot about the importance of that to that community. The Liverpool Urgent Care Clinic is working well. And can I say to the member, there is no electorate that has done better from our bulk billing investments than the electorate of Fowler. Now, 97% of general practices in Fowler are bulk billing 100% of their patients. And I know how often the member acknowledges the benefit of our investments in strengthening Medicare, and I thank her for those frequent acknowledgements. But she asks about the NDIS, and I thank her for that question and her interest particularly around called communities. We've had a discussion already about that. First of all, can I say how determined we are to get this scheme back on track? It's growing too fast, it's got too big, there's frankly too much money going to shonks and fraudsters, and we see it as a very deep responsibility of a government, particularly a Labor government, that put this scheme in place in the first place to secure its future for the long term. A series of those changes are about essentially urgent financial controls, and I will be introducing legislation this week to put those controls in place and to get that cost growth under control. But there are other reforms. There are other reforms that will need more work in close consultation with the disability community that will take place over coming months, and that must include called members of the disability community. And given that our recognition of called participants in the NDIS relies on voluntary identification, frankly, we're currently underdoing that engagement. Only 9% of NDIS participants are registered as cold. Obviously, in a country with 30% of the population identifying as cold, that is obviously an underrepresentation. We've been working very hard to improve that engagement. Our cold strategy was co-designed with more than 800 people working with us, called NDIS participants. Over the last few months of last year, we had 68 sessions with more than 3,000 called participants and other stakeholders to inform that work. We've got an expert advisory group that is advising us about the implementation on things like better data, on making sure that markets and services are attuned to the cultural needs of participants, and I've made the decision to expand the remit of that group's work to include the reforms that the member asked me about.
Give the call to the honourable member for Sturt.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. How is Australia engaging with other countries in relation to the Strait of Hormuz? How will last night's budget improve capability for the Australian Defence Force? And how does this compare to other approaches?
Call to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Defence.
Well, can I thank the member for her question and acknowledge her extensive experience in Australia's defence industry. Last night, along with 40 defence ministers from around the world, I participated in a meeting of the multinational military mission in respect of the Strait of Hormuz. And we were all resolute that the Strait of Hormuz be open, that freedom of navigation apply, and that when conditions allow, a defensive military mission underpin this. Australia has made a commitment to this mission. Indeed, we've committed an E7 wedge-tail, and we will have further talks with the UK, with France and with our other partners about how else we can contribute. But the conflict in the Middle East has highlighted the volatile nature of the world in which we live, the acute pressure which is being placed upon the global rules-based order, and the impact on Australia, our region and the world of disrupted sea lines of communication. And looking forward, this is really our most consequential strategic risk, that a future adversary would seek to coerce Australia by disrupting those sea lanes. And so, in last night's budget, we had a significant increase to defence spending. $14.5 billion over the forward estimates, $53 billion over the decade. So since coming to government, we have increased defence spending over the next 4 years by $30 billion relative to what we inherited, $117 billion over the decade. Now, to try and put that in some kind of context, during the entire period of the former coalition government, they increased defence spending by just $10 billion over the planning decade, which is to say that in the last 4 years we have done 12 times as much in respect to increasing defence spending as what the Liberals did in their entire 9 years in office. I mean, they were very big about awarding the Defence Ministry as a trophy to those on the front bench. 6 different people won that prize, and since going into opposition, another 3 have won the prize, including the Leader of the Opposition. But while they've been completely focused on the defence trophy, they have utterly ignored defence policy and, with that, the nation. Now, the Albanese government is changing all of that. Since 2023, we have increased defence spending each and every year, and what we did last night was the biggest step. And the result is to provide a much more capable defence force, which in a challenging world can keep Australians safe.
Call to the honourable member for Riverina.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Labor's budget of broken promises and higher taxes contains a budget bomb with more than $18 billion in new net zero spending. At the same time, Labor has ripped more than $600 million from essential health services for our veterans. Why has the Prime Minister decided to prioritise breaking promises, raising taxes and spending big on net zero while cutting vital support and services for our veterans, including funding for the Invictus Games?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question. I'll ask both the Energy Minister and the Veterans Minister might want to supplement my answer. But can I say this when it comes to veterans? We have significant additional investment in this budget as a result of the Royal Commission and the response into veteran suicide. That comes on top of something like $800 million as the package in this budget. And in addition to that, of course, one of the big expenditures that we have had upon coming to government was addressing the backlog that was there. People waiting forever and ever. Now, the member for Calare knows something about this because he stood up, to his great credit, to the former government, of which he was a part as a minister, and said he's just not going to cop the cuts that were there in the budget. So we put significant investment in the budget to make sure.
No. When I say cease interjecting, that means cease interjecting. You leave the chamber under 94A.
we put significant investment in our budgets to make sure that that delay, where people literally were leaving this earth while they were waiting for payments to come through, it was a complete outrage. It is one of the things that led us to a significant increase in public servants so that we could clear that backlog. But I might see if either of the ministers want to supplement.
Minister for Veterans Affairs.
Well, I thank the Prime Minister for the opportunity to address something that the member has raised, which is actually a great success of this year's budget for veterans, because what we have been able to do here is to make sure that as we've improved the system, as the Prime Minister said, more people have been able to get their claims processed and get access to the health care they need. But what that has also seen is a degree of over-servicing coming into the system where practitioners are taking advantage of veterans. And so what we have done is introduced an annual monetary cap for allied health services, which is well above what the vast majority of veterans ever actually access, but for a small proportion will mean that we remove over-servicing, restoring integrity to the system. But importantly, by doing this, we are increasing the fees that will be paid to allied health professionals by $169 million over the forwards. That means it's easier for veterans to access health care. Veterans and health professionals have been saying to us for a long time, you need to increase fees. The Royal Commission said to us, increase the fees. And that is what this budget is delivering, so that our veterans get better access to health care. That is what you're seeing reflected in the budget and the additional funding that is going into implementing Royal Commission recommendations as well.
Call to the honourable member for Petrie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Aged Care and Seniors. How is the Albanese Labor government's budget building Australia's future through historic investment into aged care?
Call to the Minister for Aged Care and the Minister for Seniors.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Petrie. She's an extraordinary representative for her community and she stands up for older people every single day. Mr Speaker, last night the Treasurer delivered a budget that is responsible, that's ambitious and that is squarely focused on building Australia's future. It's a budget that backs workers and strengthens Medicare, that builds the homes, the workforce and the skills that this country needs for the decades ahead. And for older Australians in need of care, it builds more aged care beds and improves home care so that more older Australians can access the high-quality aged care they deserve.
Order.
Mr Speaker, we cannot build the Australia of tomorrow without delivering on our promise to the people who built the Australia of today. And that's why at the centre of our aged care agenda in this budget is a significant boost to residential aged care. Labor has already invested more than $1 billion through the Aged Care Capital Assistance Program since 2022, and we're not stopping there. In response to the accommodation pricing review, we're building on our record investments to deliver more beds in the places that need them most, built in partnership with a sector that we're determined to keep strong and sustainable in the interests of every older Australian. These are 5,000 real beds every year for the parents and the grandparents that raised each of us. It'll mean real jobs in care and in construction. It'll mean older Australians getting the care they need closer to home sooner. And it'll have a particular focus on ensuring those who need financial support to get into appropriate aged care are never left behind. Mr Speaker, this is a budget that lives Labor's values. First Nations elders who have received stolen generations redress payments will no longer have those payments counted against them in residential aged care means assessments. That's the right thing to do. And this budget will continue our work to make sure that more Australians can age at home with dignity, purpose and quality care. No older Australian with a place in the Support at Home program will be out of pocket for help with showering, dressing or continence care. And we'll extend care for older Australians in the final weeks of their lives, giving them continuity and certainty so they can focus on precious moments with their loved ones. Mr Speaker, this is what a responsible, ambitious budget looks like. It builds on our generational reforms and record-breaking investments in aged care. It shows we've listened to older Australians, their families, workers and providers, and it delivers on our promise to build a fairer and more compassionate aged care system that every Australian can trust. And, Mr Speaker, it is one more step in this Labor government's careful, considered work of building an aged care system worthy of the Australians who rely on it every single day.
Call to the honourable member for Curtin.
My question is to the Treasurer. I support the capital gains tax reform for housing, but my community and I are concerned about its impact on the start-up sector, which contributes significantly to productivity. The reforms announced could undermine investment in innovative, high-risk, early-stage businesses. I acknowledge your commitment to consult with stakeholders on this issue. Could you outline the consultation process and whether the government is considering a carve-out for early-stage businesses?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and to the member for Curtin for her important question. I do acknowledge that in parts of our economy, a very important part of our economy, the start-up and VC sector, that there is more work to do, more consultation to do to make sure that we get the right set of arrangements. And I wanted to acknowledge other members on this side of the House, including the member for Chifley and other members who I've been engaging with. The member for Parramatta is obviously across these issues, and a bunch of other issues, and other colleagues as well. The budget is very supportive of venture capital and VC. There's a number of tax changes in there which are about supporting, assisting, encouraging, incentivising more of this really important part of the economy. But I do acknowledge that even before last night, this sector had raised some issues with us. We had been consulting privately with the sector already before last night to make sure that we can get the right arrangements in place. I say to this part of the economy, we think that you are a really important part of the economy, in lots of ways the hope of the side when it comes to dynamism and productivity, and we will reflect and recognise that in our policy. There are particular circumstances in this part of the economy when it comes to the calculation of the cost base for CGT, which is the concern that the member and other members is reflecting. My commitment to the sector, publicly and privately, has been to continue to work on these issues to get the best landing that we can. It's a very, very small part of our economy, and so it's not a big part of the changes that we are announcing, but it's an important part of the economy, and our work will reflect that.
Call to the honourable member for Whitlam.
My question is to the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme. How is the Albanese Labor government working to secure the NDIS for future generations?
The call to the Minister for Health and Ageing, the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member for Whitlam. I don't think there's anyone in this chamber who knows more about the NDIS and disability services than the member for Whitlam. She has worked with it and in it for the entirety of the scheme's life, including before coming here last year as the chief executive of one of the country's largest disability institutions. So I value her advice very deeply, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the NDIS is unarguably one of Australia's great modern reforms. It's gone from the dream of generations of activists through the 70s, 80s and 90s to become a truly cherished institution. It's changed the lives, as all of us know, of literally hundreds of thousands of people with disability and their families as well. But the truth is it currently costs too much, it's growing too fast, and has become a soft target for too many fraudsters and shonks, as well as, frankly, serious organised crime. And we simply can't go on like this. We can't afford for the NDIS to continue to fail. The steps we've taken over the last few years to get it back on track simply aren't delivering the results that we need to see in the scheme. Since just last December, the mid-year budget review at MyEFO, Mr Speaker, costs have blown out already by more than $13 billion, and these blowouts simply can't continue. And that's why later this week I'll introduce legislation to get a grip on that scheme inflation and on plan inflation as well, and to set the clearest possible path, Mr Speaker, to a secure, sustainable future for the NDIS. And that path rests on 4 pillars: fighting fraud and stopping rorts, which everyone wants to do; slowing rapid cost increases of the type we've seen in the latest cost blowout since just December, Mr Speaker. Clearer eligibility requirements to get the scheme back to its original intent, and most importantly, delivering quality supports and services to people living with a disability. I want to stress, Mr Speaker, even with these changes, the NDIS will continue to grow every single year. But by the end of the decade, we project it will cost $55 billion rather than the current projection of $70 billion, Mr Speaker. It will still be the largest social program that we have in this country outside the age pension, and still the centrepiece of the most comprehensive framework of supports for people with disability you will find anywhere in the planet, Mr Speaker. The bill I'll present later this week is simply good financial management, good financial control. The deeper reform that we've telegraphed in my speech to the Press Club will obviously be conducted in close consultation with the disability community and with states and territories as well.
Time has concluded. Give the call to the member for Page.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. Treasurer, why is the Albanese Labor government introducing a 50% capital gains tax discount for foreign multinationals investing in renewable energy projects, saving them $450 million, while taxing hard-working Australian mum and dad investors with more?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The member is referring to the transitional arrangements in the renewable energy sector, where we're moving from a more generous treatment to a less generous treatment over time, and so he's not quite accurately representing the situation, Mr Speaker. What we're doing in capital gains for foreign investors is equalising the arrangement because it was too generous to foreign investors. We're making it more consistent with the tax paid by Australians, and that means, in some important areas of the economy, a transition from the existing arrangements to the new arrangements. Just like in the capital gains tax changes we announced last night, there are transitional arrangements there too.
The call to the honourable member for Brisbane.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Small Business. How is the Albanese government easing pressure on small businesses and ensuring they can plan for the future?
Give the call to the Minister for International Development, the Minister for Small Business and the Minister for Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I do want to thank the member for Brisbane for her question. It was an absolute pleasure to visit some of the really inspiring small businesses in her electorate, I think around 2 weeks ago, and I thank her for that. Since we came to government, Mr Speaker, I'm pleased to inform the House that Australians have established an additional 180,000 small businesses. Visionary individuals who are strengthening our workforce, they're strengthening our supply chains and, of course, strengthening our communities. And yesterday's budget delivers for them, ensuring that they have the settings that they need to thrive. As one masthead put it, gee whiz, it's a win for small biz. Clever. Declaring that Aussies running small businesses are a surprise winner in this year's budget, even going so far as to call it a cash flow hug from our great Treasurer here. We're backing small businesses as part of our $3.5 billion of new business tax relief to boost investment, to increase cash flow and to support growth. Now, the $20,000 instant asset write-off has been a lifeline for small businesses seeking to upgrade or purchase assets to grow their businesses and to keep their cash flowing. But for many years, they've had to navigate whether or not the instant asset write-off would be available for them in future years. They've had to navigate that uncertainty. That's now a permanent feature of this government's small business assistance, making it a permanent feature for small businesses and, importantly, Mr Speaker, saving small businesses around $32 million per year in compliance costs. The budget also contains a permanent 2-year loss carryback so that small businesses can return to profitability faster and they can have the confidence to invest earlier.
big one is that we are slashing red tape, simplifying the tax system, harmonising national systems with a tell-us-once approach, cutting regulatory costs by over $10 billion right across the economy. And we're improving, along with free TAFE and incentives for apprenticeships, we're improving skills recognition and skilled migration systems so that small businesses can have access to the skilled workforce they need. Now, red tape, cash flow and access to skilled workers are the three big things that small businesses raise with me every time I see them. And this budget sends a clear message to them that the Albanese government has listened. We're delivering the kinds of changes that they need to thrive and grow because they have an Australian story, a story of nation-building, of aspiration and of giving back.
Call to the honourable member for Kooyong.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health and Ageing. After months of sustained advocacy and almost 8,000 campaign emails, I am thrilled that the budget includes an additional $508 million for medical research. This means that disbursements from the Medical Research Future Fund will increase to $1 billion a year from 2030. It's a huge win for the medical research community, but it is contingent on your government releasing the long overdue National Health and Medical Research Strategy. Minister, when are we going to see the strategy?
Call to the Minister for Health, the Minister for Disability and the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker. Thanks to the member for Kooyong for that question. As she knows, Australia punches way above its weight in health and medical research. About number 7 in the world, although we don't even rate in the top 50 by way of population. And that was the objective, the mission of Billy Hughes 80 years ago this year when he established the NHMRC, and we've achieved it. We have year upon year added great potential for healthcare, not just for people here in Australia, but right across the world. But I acknowledge people have wanted us to do more, including the member herself, but the member for Melbourne, who has the great honour of representing one of the most important biomedical precincts on the planet at Parkville. She's been a strong advocate. The member for Chisholm and the Minister for Housing, who have that rival precinct down in Clayton, has also been a strong advocate, many others besides. And I want to acknowledge the Treasurer, with a very busy workload, has thought about this very carefully after the 10-year review of the MRFF, lobbying for many in the community, which is why I was so very pleased in a very challenging budget to be able to find around $500 million in new funding to start to see those disbursements ramp up from $650 million a year to $1 billion a year by the end of this decade. As well, as the member probably knows, we've found $15 million to do the next stage of the one-stop shop for clinical trials to improve the clinical trials and research environment in Australia as well. Once we hit that $1 billion mark, when you put it alongside the NHMRC funding, we'll be investing $2 billion or more every single year in our world-class health and medical research workforce. And this is going to be a terrific thing when we get to that. To the national strategy, as the member knows, and many members on our side have engaged in this as well, we asked Rosemary Huxtable, a very esteemed former public servant who was Secretary of Finance, Deputy Secretary of Health, as well as holding many other positions, to do a unified strategy rather than having an NHMRC strategy and an MRFF strategy. That has been delivered to government. I wanted to wait until a budget outcome around MRFF disbursements as well as the one-stop shop before we look at releasing that, but I'll have more to say about that in the coming days.
Call to the honourable member for Paterson.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories. How will the Albanese Labor government's budget deliver for regional Australia, and how does this compare to other approaches, Minister?
Give a call to the Minister for Emergency Management, the Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories.
Thank you so much, Mr Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Paterson for her passionate representation of her community in Paterson. I'm thrilled to once again rise and speak in this place about how the Albanese government is delivering for regional Australians, because that is what we're continuing to do, Mr Speaker. We are delivering. We're delivering on cost of living, we're delivering on health and in housing, because your postcode should never be a barrier to opportunity, particularly in regional Australia. And when it comes to cost of living in regional Australia, Mr Speaker, not much bites us harder than the cost of fuel. And there's no doubt regional Australia has been hit hardest by the impact of the global fuel shortage. And that's why our comprehensive $14.8 billion plan to secure more fuel, to strengthen our supply chains, to build resilience and to take the sting out of prices is so incredibly important to regional communities. And speaking of stings and bites, Mr Speaker, our Medicare urgent care clinics are the place to be if you need treatment, which is why this government's nearly $580 million investment to keep them open and free matters most, particularly for Australians living in regional and rural communities. 137 clinics providing accessible urgent care services across the country, and 47 of those are supporting communities in regional, rural and remote Australia, Mr Speaker. And then there's our $25 million investment to establish 6 new bulk billing clinics across the Central Coast, Newcastle, Lake Macquarie and the Hunter. That's right, Mr Speaker, we're supporting more GP practices bulk billing, unlike those opposite who stood by as GP practices closed in regional Australia under their watch. And, Mr Speaker, this government is committed to addressing the housing challenges faced by regional Australians. That's why $500 million has been dedicated to local enabling infrastructure in regional Australia, the power, the roads, the drains that are needed for new housing. And on top of that, our tax changes make sure that 75,000 Australians achieve the dream of home ownership. And, Mr Speaker, I want to highlight our commitment of an additional $750 million for further rounds of our flagship programs, Growing Regions and Thriving Suburbs, bringing our total investment since 2022 to $1.7 billion. Mr Speaker, our government is getting on with the job of delivering for regional Australia, which is in stark contrast to those opposite who paid to hold our fuel reserves in Texas. Last time I checked, that wasn't in the country. And it reminds me of a saying, Mr Speaker, all sizzle and no steak, and that's what they have opposite. All statement, no substance, and that's why regional Australia relies on this side of the House, the Labor government.
Call to the Prime Minister.
On that fine note, Mr Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.
Order. If members can take their seats or leave quickly and quietly, we will just go to papers, and I call the Leader of the House.
Speaker, these documents are tabled in accordance with the list circulated to the honourable members earlier today. Full details of the documents will be recorded in the votes and proceedings.
Okay, if members can leave the chamber quickly and quietly.